Welcome to My Expat Stories. Martin's a 53-year-old divorce lawyer from Melbourne, 25 years representing women trapped in marriages they couldn't escape. Domestic violence cases, financial abuse, coercive control. He's seen it all. He knows what manipulation looks like. He's built an entire career around spotting it. Then he takes a charity trip to the Philippines and meets Dahlia at an orphanage in Cebu City. And for the first time in his professional life, he doesn't see it coming. Not even close. $95,000 later, he finds out that the man who spent decades rescuing women got rescued himself, right into an empty bank account. If you've ever been absolutely certain you were the smartest person in the room, smash that subscribe and like button, because Martin was certain too, and he was catastrophically wrong. Here's Martin. Right, before you say anything, before you start thinking what you're thinking, I need you to understand something about me. I'm not a mug. I have spent 25 years in Australian family courts. 25 years sitting across from men who lied, men who manipulated, men who twisted words and rewrote histories and made their wives feel like they were going insane. I have looked into the eyes of men who called themselves loving husbands while their partners couldn't stop shaking, and I have taken them apart. Every single time. I know what a liar looks like. I know what manipulation feels like. I know the patterns, the micro-expressions. The way a story doesn't quite add up if you listen carefully enough. It's not instinct, it's skill, developed over decades of doing this work. So when I tell you what happened in the Philippines, I need you to sit with the fact that it happened to me. Martin, the man who spots liars for a living. The man who has never, not once in 25 years, been on the wrong side of a courtroom. Until Dahlia, I'm 53, divorce lawyer. Melbourne, Hawthorne specifically. Good practice. Successful, comfortable life. House near the park. Late model BMW, good wine in the cellar. The whole picture. Divorced myself, actually. Twice. Which is either ironic or entirely predictable, depending on how you look at it. No kids. Never wanted them. My clients' kids were enough heartbreak for one lifetime. I went to the Filipinas on a charity trip. A colleague, Sandra, she'd been organising volunteer trips to orphanages in Cebu for about 3 years. Legal aid stuff mostly, helping families navigate the system. I'd done a few trips with her before. It was good work, meaningful. And honestly, after 25 years of ugly divorces, it was nice to do something that felt clean. We flew into Cebu City on a Thursday. Sandra and me and about 8 other lawyers and paralegals from various Melbourne firms. Stayed at a hotel near the IT park. Modern place. Air conditioning that actually worked. Good breakfast buffet. The kind of place you stay when you want to feel civilised while doing something noble. The orphanage was about 40 minutes outside the city. A collection of concrete buildings set back from the road, surrounded by a low wall with a gate that squeaked when you opened it. Inside, it was quieter than you'd expect. Kids playing in the courtyard, some of them shy, some of them bold. A couple of older ones watching us with this sharp curiosity that reminded me of my younger clients. Kids who'd learned to read adults faster than most adults could read each other. The smell hit you first. Cooking rice, concrete dust. Something floral I couldn't identify, maybe from the flowering trees along the wall. And underneath all of it, that particular scent of a place where a lot of children lived. Soap and skin and something warm and alive. We were shown around by a woman called Sister Agnes. Nun, 60s. Sharp eyes, dry sense of humour. She walked us through the facilities, introduced us to the staff, showed us the legal aid office where we'd be working. It was a small room with 2 desks, fluorescent lighting, and stacks of folders thick enough to make my eyes water, and that's when I saw Dahlia. She was in the courtyard, kneeling on the ground next to a little girl of about 5. The girl had scraped her knee, was crying. Not loudly, the quiet kind of crying that kids do when they don't want to make a fuss, but it really, genuinely hurts. And Dahlia was cleaning the scrape with a cotton pad, very gently, very slowly, talking to the girl, the whole time in a soft voice that I couldn't quite hear from where I was standing. I watched for about 30 seconds, maybe 40, and in that time something clicked. Not attraction, not exactly. Something bigger than that. Something that felt like recognition. I found out later that Dahlia was a volunteer, had been at the orphanage for about 6 months. Not paid, not required to be there. She just showed up every day and helped. With the kids, with the cooking, with whatever needed doing. Sister Agnes talked about her like she was a gift from God. which, given that Sister Agnes was a nun, carried some weight. Dahlia was 28. From a village in the Visayas, quiet, gentle. The kind of woman who listened more than she talked, and when she did talk, she chose her words carefully, like each one mattered. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Not in a seductive way, in a way that said, I see you. I'm paying attention. We were introduced formally on the second day. Sandra brought us together over lunch in the orphanage kitchen. Simple food, rice and fish and vegetables. The kind of meal that tasted better than it looked because everyone at the table was genuinely happy to be eating it. Dahlia shook my hand, firm but not aggressive. Her eyes met mine and held for just a second longer than necessary. And she said, Sandra tells me you fight for women. I told her that was one way to put it. She nodded, slowly, like she was weighing that. And then she said, that's a rare thing, in my experience. 2 sentences, that's all it took. 2 sentences and the way she said them, and something inside my chest shifted like a key turning in a lock. Because she was right. It was a rare thing. And someone seeing that, acknowledging it, in a place like this, in a country where the women I'd spent my career fighting for barely existed on anyone's radar. It felt important. It felt like it meant something. Over the next week, Dahlia and I kept crossing paths. The orphanage wasn't big. You couldn't avoid someone even if you tried. But I wasn't trying to avoid her. I was drawn to her the way you're drawn to a case that matters. The ones that keep you up at night. Not because they're complicated, but because the stakes are real. We talked during breaks, over rice and fish in the kitchen, in the courtyard while the kids played, on the concrete steps outside the legal aid office when the afternoon heat was at its worst and the air was thick enough to chew. She told me about her life, about growing up poor, about watching her mother struggle after her father left, about deciding she wanted to help people, even though helping people never paid. Everything she said confirmed what I was already feeling, that here was a woman, genuinely good, genuinely selfless, who deserved better than what life had given her. And that quiet, persistent thought, the one that whispered, you could help her, Martin. You could actually make a difference. That thought got louder every day. It was familiar. The feeling. I'd felt it 1,000 times in courtrooms. The moment when you look at a client and think, this person's story needs to change, and you're the one who's going to change it. The only difference was that this time, it wasn't a client. On my last night in Cebu, we sat on the steps outside the orphanage gate. The evening was warm, insects humming, the sky going from blue to purple to dark. Dahlia was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I've thought about every day since. Martin, do you think it's possible to change someone's life just by deciding to? I told her I'd spent my entire career trying to do exactly that. She smiled, looked at her hands, and said very quietly, I wish someone would try, for me. Not a request. Not even close to a request, just a thought spoken out loud. Spoken to the one man in the world who had built his identity around granting exactly that kind of wish. I flew home to Melbourne 2 days later, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. The first transfer happened 11 days after I got home. Not because Dahlia asked. Well, she did ask, but not in the way you'd think. She messaged me on Viber saying her mother had been taken to hospital in Iloilo. Chest pains. Needed tests. The message was matter of fact. Reporting a fact. Like she was updating a colleague. Not asking for help. Just informing me of what was happening in her life. I read it on my phone in my office in Hawthorne. Tuesday morning. Rain on the window. Coffee going cold on my desk. A stack of client files I should have been working through. And I read that message and something in my chest tightened the way it always does when a client tells me about a problem that shouldn't exist but does. I messaged back, how much does she need? Dahlia hesitated. I could see the typing indicator start and stop 3 times before her reply came through. Martin, I don't want to trouble you. I told her it wasn't trouble. I told her that's what I do. I help people who need help. She sent the amount, 3,000 Australian dollars. Reasonable. Medical costs in the Philippines, even at a decent hospital, weren't astronomical. I transferred it that afternoon. Same day. Didn't lose a second of sleep over it. What I felt when I hit send was not guilt, not anxiety. Not the slight queasy feeling you get when you send a large amount of money to someone you've known for a short time. What I felt was purpose. Clean, clear, uncomplicated purpose. This is who I am. I help people. Over the next month, the messages continued. Always from Dahlia, always calm, always slightly apologetic, like she was genuinely uncomfortable asking. Her mother needed follow-up treatment. Another 2,000. A family member in the village needed surgery for cataracts. 1,500. Her younger brother's school fees were overdue, and if they weren't paid, he'd be dropped from the program. 4,000. Each request was specific. Each one came with context. Each one felt legitimate. And each time Dahlia would pad the message with something that made the money feel secondary. An update on one of the kids at the orphanage. A photo of the sunrise over the Visayas. A question about my week. How was the practice going? Had I eaten properly? She cared about me, that's what it felt like. Genuine care. Reciprocal. Not the one-way drain you'd expect if someone was just running a tap. And that's the thing about Dahlia, she was good. Really good. Because the one thing I'd learned in 25 years of family law was that the best manipulators don't take. They create a relationship where giving feels mutual, where you feel like you're being looked after, even as you're being cleaned out. The best ones make you grateful for the privilege of helping them. I didn't see it then, obviously. But looking back, I can identify the technique with surgical precision, which makes it worse, not better. By month 3, I'd sent about $22,000 total. I kept a spreadsheet. Old habit from client billing. Column A, date. Column B, purpose. Column C, amount. Column D, Dahlia's response. I filled it in religiously. Not because I was worried, because it made the giving feel organised, professional, like a project I was managing. And in some ways, that's exactly what it was. I started researching the Philippines, really researching it, the healthcare system, the education system, property costs, business regulations. I wanted to understand the landscape, wanted to make sure I was helping effectively, wanted to be strategic about it. Sandra, my colleague, noticed, asked me about it one afternoon in the kitchen. We were eating lunch, sandwiches, the usual Melbourne lawyer lunch. And she said casually, "You seem very invested in that orphanage trip, Martin." I told her I was helping someone, a woman I'd met there, genuinely needed support. Sandra looked at me for a long time, not judging, not exactly, more like she was filing something away, the way I do when a witness says something in court that doesn't quite fit the rest of their testimony. She didn't say anything else about it, but I noticed her watching me after that, in the office, at firm dinners, like she was keeping an eye on something she was concerned about, but hadn't yet found the words for. Month 4 is when I went back. Told myself it was another charity trip. Told Sandra I was going to help with the legal aid again. Both of those things were technically true. But the real reason I booked the flight was Dahlia. I wanted to see her. In person. Wanted to see the results of what I'd been doing. See the mother recovering. See the brother still in school. See the orphanage and the kids. And the life I was quietly helping to build. Flew into Cebu on a Saturday. Took a taxi to the hotel. Same place as before, same breakfast buffet, same air conditioning. But this time I didn't go to the orphanage first. I called Dahlia. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, surprised, happy in a way that sounded entirely genuine. She asked where I was. I told her I was in Cebu. There was a pause. Then she laughed. A real laugh. Short and surprised and delighted. "Martin, you came back." I told her I wanted to see her. She said she'd meet me at a small restaurant near the IT park. An hour. She needed to shower first, she said, and laughed again at herself for saying it. That hour was the longest hour I'd sat through since waiting for a verdict in a particularly difficult custody case. The restaurant was small, family-run, wooden tables, a fan spinning lazily overhead, the smell of garlic and coconut milk coming from the kitchen, a TV in the corner showing basketball. The Philippines and basketball, you can't separate them. Same way you can't separate Melbourne and AFL. Dahlia walked in, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something that had nothing to do with law or money or rescue. Something that felt dangerously close to joy. She looked beautiful. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet way. Simple dress, hair loose, minimal makeup. She spotted me, smiled and walked over with this slightly shy quality that made the whole room feel smaller and warmer at the same time. We talked for 3 hours. The food was extraordinary, sinigang, sour and savoury, and warming in a way that cut through the humidity. Kare, rich and nutty, with the bagung on the side sending up this pungent wave every time the lid was lifted. We ate slowly, drank San Miguel. The conversation moved the way good conversations move, effortlessly. Topic to topic. Laughter when it came naturally, silence when it felt comfortable. She asked about my cases. I told her about one anonymised, a woman trapped in a marriage where the husband controlled every peso. Dahlia listened with her whole body, leaned forward, eyes focused. At the end she said, "You are doing God's work, Martin. God's work. Coming from a woman who volunteered at an orphanage. From a woman who seemed genuinely moved by the idea that someone, somewhere, was fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves." I believed every word. The second trip lasted 2 weeks. I stayed at the hotel but spent most of my time with Dahlia, at the orphanage, at the restaurant, walking through Cebu City in the evenings when the heat dropped slightly, and the streets filled with people and the smell of grilling meat from the street stalls mixed with exhaust fumes and something sweet from the bakeries. She showed me the neighbourhood where she stayed, a small boarding house near the orphanage, shared bathroom, tiny room, a single bed and a desk and a window that looked out onto a concrete wall. It was clean, but it was bare, sparse in a way that made my stomach clench. "This is what it looks like when you spend your life helping other people," she said, not complaining, stating a fact, with this quiet dignity that made me want to tear down the concrete wall and build her something better. The requests continued during the trip, smaller ones this time, groceries for her mother, a repair at the boarding house, something for the orphanage kitchen, but also bigger ones presented with the same gentle hesitation. A lump sum for her brother's university deposit. Another round of treatment for her mother's condition, which, Dahlia explained with genuine worry creasing her forehead, was proving resistant to the initial medication. I paid for all of it, without hesitation, without calculation, with the same instinct that had driven me through 25 years of courtrooms. Rescue. That was the instinct. Pure and simple. Someone needed saving. And I was the one who could do it. The red flags were there, of course they were. I'm a lawyer. I could see them if I looked. The mother. I'd sent thousands for her treatment, but Dahlia had never once suggested I meet her. Every time I brought it up, there was a reason. Mum was resting. Mum wasn't feeling well today. Mum was embarrassed about visitors seeing her while she was sick. Each reason was reasonable. Each one was delivered with just enough emotion to make pressing the point feel cruel. The orphanage. Sister Agnes, when I went back, seemed pleased to see me, but slightly surprised by my interest in Dahlia specifically. I asked her about it. She said Dahlia was wonderful with the children, dedicated, hard-working. But when I asked how long she'd been volunteering, Sister Agnes paused, just a fraction of a second, said she'd been there about 6 months. I'd been under the impression it was longer. Dahlia's phone. She had two. One she used with me, one she kept in her bag, face down, always on silent. When it buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly and then put it away. Never answered it in front of me. Never explained what it was. Each flag on its own was a thread. Pull one and it might lead somewhere. Pull none of them and they're just details. Background noise in a complicated life. And I pulled none of them, because pulling them would have meant questioning the story. And the story was the most meaningful thing that had happened to me in years. By the end of month 6, the spreadsheet showed 68,000 Australian dollars. Column A, column B, column C, column D. All neat, all organised, all proof that I was doing what I'd always done, saving someone. Saving. Except the someone I was saving had a smile that never quite reached the same place twice. And a story that, if I'd looked at it the way I looked at evidence in court, didn't quite hold together. But I wasn't in court. I was in love. And love, it turns out, is the one place where even the sharpest lawyers go blind. It was Sandra who broke it open. Not Dahlia making a mistake. Not me suddenly waking up. Sandra, my colleague, the one who'd been watching me for months with that quiet, concerned look, the one who filed things away. She called me on a Wednesday evening. I was in my office, late, working through a file. She said she needed to talk to me about something. Her voice had that tone, the one I recognised from courtrooms, the one that meant the evidence was in and it wasn't good. She told me she'd done some checking. On Dahlia. Not intrusive checking. Careful checking. The kind of due diligence we do on witnesses before cross-examination. She'd contacted Sister Agnes at the orphanage directly, had a long conversation, And what Sister Agnes told her didn't match what Dahlia had told me. The orphanage records showed Dahlia had been volunteering for 3 months, not 6. She'd arrived 2 weeks before my first charity trip. Not before. 2 weeks before. Like she'd been placed there. Sister Agnes also said something else. Something that made Sandra's voice go very quiet on the phone. She said that 2 other foreign men had volunteered at the same orphanage in the previous 2 years. Both had formed close relationships with local women connected to the orphanage. Both had sent significant sums of money back to the Philippines after returning home. Both had eventually stopped contact entirely. Sandra paused after she said that. Let it sit. I sat with it for about 10 seconds. Then I hung up the phone and sat in my office for a very long time. I didn't confront Dahlia by phone. I didn't send a message demanding answers. I didn't do any of the things a normal person might do when they discover they've been played. I booked a flight to Cebu, first class, because I wanted to be sharp, rested, thinking clearly, because if this was going to be a confrontation, I wanted to approach it the way I approached every difficult cross-examination of my career. Prepared, calm, with every question already mapped out. I landed on a Friday morning, didn't go to the hotel, went straight to the orphanage. Sister Agnes saw me coming through the gate and her face did something complicated. Relief and guilt and something else. All at once. Like she'd been waiting for this visit and dreading it simultaneously. I asked if Dahlia was here. She wasn't. Hadn't been there for 3 days. I asked Sister Agnes for Dahlia's address. The boarding house. She gave it to me slowly, like she was handing over something fragile. The boarding house was exactly where Dahlia had shown me. Same concrete wall outside the window. Same narrow hallway. Same shared bathroom with the cracked tile on the floor that I'd noticed months ago and never mentioned. I knocked on her door. She opened it in about 5 seconds, like she'd been expecting me, or like she'd been awake and alert, waiting for something to happen. She looked at me, and for about 2 seconds, the mask was still on, the gentle smile, the surprised warmth, the slight widening of the eyes that said, "Oh, Martin, you're here, how wonderful." Then she saw my face, and the mask came off. It didn't come off dramatically. No sudden shift in expression. No flash of anger or guilt. It just slid away, like a layer of paint dissolving in water. And underneath was something I recognized instantly, because I'd seen it 10,000 times in courtrooms. Composure, calculation, the face of someone who has been caught and is already working out how to manage the situation. "Come in," she said. We sat in her small room. She on the bed, me in the desk chair. The fan clicking overhead, the concrete wall doing its grey thing outside the window. And I laid it out. Everything. Sister Agnes's records. The timeline. The 2 other men. The mother who never seemed to recover. The sister who didn't exist. The 2 phones. The way every request had been timed and sized perfectly to feel reasonable but accumulate into something massive. I laid it out the way I'd lay out evidence in a custody hearing. Methodical, clear. Without emotion. Because emotion would have made it harder and I needed it to be easy. I needed to say it all out loud so it was real, and not just something I was feeling in my chest. When I finished, the room was quiet except for the fan. Dahlia looked at me for a long time, then she leaned back on the bed, crossed her ankles, relaxed. Visibly relaxed, like a pressure had been lifted. "Well," she said, "that took longer than I expected. Not an apology, not a denial. Not tears or begging or any of the performances I'd seen from guilty parties in court. Just a statement, delivered with something that was almost amusement. I asked her if any of it was real. The orphanage, the kids, the way she looked at me. She tilted her head, considered the question genuinely, it seemed, like it was actually interesting to think about. "The kids are real," she said. "I do like the kids. Sister Agnes is a good woman, and the work matters. The rest of it," she shrugged. "One shoulder, clean and practiced. The rest of it was tailored. For you specifically. Sandra told me about you before I ever saw you. Your background, your cases, what makes you tick." Sandra. I felt something cold move through me. Not because Sandra was involved, because Sandra had told Dahlia about me. Casually. Innocently. The way colleagues do. Mentioning a lawyer who fights for women. Not knowing that information would be used as a blueprint. "The mother?" I asked. "Alive and well. In Iloilo. We talk every week." "The brother?" "Exists," Doesn't need university fees. He works at a car wash. The 2 phones? She smiled, actually smiled. One for the job, one for my life. Standard practice. The job. She called it that. The job. I asked her the question that had been sitting in my throat since I walked in. How much have you actually taken from me? She told me she'd have to check her records. Said it matter-of-factly, like she was a bookkeeper looking up an invoice. Then she pulled out her phone, the second one, the one that was always face down, and scrolled through something for about a minute. 94,812, she said. Australian dollars, across 14 months. 14 months. I'd been sending money for 14 months. And she had it itemised, tracked, filed away somewhere on that phone in neat little columns, probably not unlike my own spreadsheet. I asked her why she'd done it. She looked at me with an expression that was entirely without malice, which somehow made it worse. Because you wanted to be the hero, Martin, and heroes pay for that privilege. They always have. I messaged her from the taxi on the way back to the hotel. 2 words. The 2 words from the cold open. The ones that had buzzed on my phone while I was sitting in the back seat, watching Cebu City slide past the window in a blur of concrete and colour, a noise that suddenly felt like nothing at all. I typed, "Was real?" She didn't reply. Not then, not ever. Back in Melbourne, I called my bank, explained the situation, the same conversation I'd had with Sandra. Voluntary transfers, authorised by me, my credentials, my decisions. Legally, there was nothing to recover. I'd sent the money, willingly, repeatedly, for over a year. I called the Australian Federal Police. They have a unit that deals with international romance fraud. They took my details, were sympathetic, said they'd flag it, said recovery was extremely unlikely given the nature of the transfers and the jurisdictional complexity. I called the Australian Embassy in Manila. They sent me a pamphlet. I didn't go back to the orphanage. Didn't contact Sister Agnes again. Didn't pursue it further. Not because I'd given up, because I'm a lawyer and I know when a case has no legs. This one had no legs. The spreadsheet is still on my laptop. I haven't deleted it. Column A, column B, column C, column D. $95,000 of neat, organised evidence that I spent 14 months building a case I was always going to lose. Sandra and I don't talk about it. She feels guilty. She shouldn't. She didn't know. None of us knew. That's the point. I still do the charity trips, legal aid. Women in bad situations who need someone in their corner. It's still who I am. That hasn't changed. What's changed is something smaller, something harder to name. It's the moment, every time a new client sits across from me, when I look into their eyes and try to read them, and for just a fraction of a second, before the training kicks in, before the instinct takes over, there's a pause, a doubt, a tiny, quiet doubt that wasn't there before. Dahlia put it there. And I don't think it's going anywhere. This is my expat stories. The man who spent 25 years saving women discovered the one thing his training never taught him. That sometimes the person in the courtroom isn't the one you think.